All right, so welcome back to the Forbes Podcast, where we have conversations to inspire, empower, and educate. And I believe today's conversation will be very empowering and educational. Today, I have on Eva Sachs, who is a divorce consultant and a respected leader in the world of divorce finance with over 15 years experience helping individuals navigate the financial realities of separation and divorce with clarity and confidence. Eva is a certified financial planner. She's a chartered financial divorce specialist with an advanced accreditation, and she's also a certified divorce financial analyst. So welcome to the podcast, Eva. It's really great to have you on. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
You're also the co-author of When Harry Left Sally, Finding Your Way Through the Gray Divorce, and an expert of the modern divorce and modern marriage contracts. It's incredible, all that you do.
Keeps me busy.
Oh, that's amazing. So what made you get in to this space as a divorce consultant?
Well, I had a traditional financial planning practice for a number of years, and certainly a lot of clients that were coming to see me were seeing me either after divorce or thinking about divorcing, and recognizing that there was a lot of discussion, since almost half the married population is getting separated and divorced. And I had heard of this specialization in this field and thought it would be something of interest for me, and certainly for helping those kinds of clients. And so I got all my certification, and in doing that, realized that there was a lot of people that were looking for certainly answers and information on the money part of separation and divorce.
Right. That's incredible. And I do believe that it's often, when you're going through it, it's very, no one kind of expects to go through this, so they don't really know what to anticipate. So for you to be so niched into this role is incredible. So how often do you help people who aren't sure, like whether they should separate or stay? And what does that early decision process look for from what you've seen?
I think when people are researching, and people are doing online researching in today's world to find information, they're searching certainly, and if one of their concerns is on the financial side of things, they're reaching out that way. So they're getting involved or contacting me at these early stages in terms of, I don't understand family finances. I need to understand, have a better picture of what that looks like. What are the implications for me before I actually make the decision to separate and divorce? Because research tells us people contemplate separation and divorce for a good number of years, 5 to 7 years. So it's not something that tends to happen instantly, but that's a concern. So they may reach out to me, certainly when they're in that contemplating stage, more so than reaching out to a lawyer, where they may be closer to making that decision. So I've crossed over that boundary line to say, all right, now I'm really thinking, now I'm going to actually separate. I need to call a lawyer. When they're contemplating, they're looking for information. And that's certainly a point in time where a lot of clients reach out to me.
Okay. And I've read the stats, so you tell me if this is still accurate. Is it true that about 40% of marriages end in divorce, and the average age now is around 46?
I would say yes. Yeah, we're certainly within that range. And just recognizing when you're reading stats about separation, divorce, these are for people that are married. There's a lot of people today that are living common law that aren't married. But I would suspect, so those stats aren't available, but I suspect the ratio of those couples that are separating is probably the same.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's not an easy journey. So what would you say for someone, and again, we like to educate and empower. So for someone who's, I guess the first part, 5 to 7 years out, is they're probably talking to, and it'd be great to reach out to someone like you to financially understand what they should be thinking of, whether to stay or go. When they get to that process, what does the process look like? Like what are the steps in that legal process to go through a separation or a divorce? What's typically high level? I know it gets very detailed.
Yeah.
Involved.
The first thing for people to understand, there is a difference between separation and divorce. So when we're talking about separation and the discussions around all of that, so how do they unbundle their marriage? They're really talking about working on creating a separation agreement, which is a legal contract between two people that determines how they're going to, if there's children, how they're going to be parenting, how they're going to be supporting their children, how they're going to be dividing their assets and debts, and if there's any entitlement to any other kind of support payments supporting each other, what that might look like. So that's the big picture of what they're going to be working on and discussing. And they can do that a number of different ways. Anything from, can they sit down at the kitchen table and decide that they can figure this out on their own? Probably not, but to a certain degree, some of those aspects they might be able to figure out. If they can't do that, they can certainly be working in something like mediation, where they're working with a neutral third party, and that neutral third party is helping facilitate those discussions and giving them some guidance and information of how other couples may have worked on some of these things. And ultimately, or they can be working through something called collaborative divorce or collaborative practice, which is a sort of a hybrid of mediation, where they have two lawyers and people like myself working with them as a team to have those kinds of discussions. And finally, they can be working in the more traditional sense of having the negotiations on all of these discussions done through two lawyers. And if they can't still agree on all of that, then they can be going to court, where a judge decides what they're going to do and how they're going to come up with their settlement. So that's the separation piece. The process of divorce is really just an over-the-counter process once they have a separation agreement in place that rubber stamps all of this and says, yes, you are no longer divorced, which means you are no longer married and can remarry. So that's sort of big picture of what all of this looks like. So a lot of discussion and negotiations on all these elements of a separation agreement.
And how long do you find it usually takes a couple to go through it? I know mine took a long time, but I know mine was different. Are most a long time?
Well, it depends. Some people are, it's a combination of how much fighting, how much disagreement there is. I'm going to say the second part from a financial perspective is how organized they are, right? In terms of, because the starting point for the discussions on all of this really comes to financial disclosure, certainly the money part of it. So we have to disclose all of our assets and liabilities that we have at the date of separation. We have to disclose any assets or liabilities that we had at date of marriage, because on the property side of things, we're dividing the growth over the period of time that we were married till we were separated. So if we had some assets when we were married, we've got to disclose that too. And disclosure means really pulling together all the financial facts, which means the paperwork, evidence, right? If we're thinking from a legal perspective, if I say I had $100 in a bank account, well, what's the evidence of that? It's a bank statement. It's something that's in paper. So that part really comes down to how organized people are. And then the other things that may delay the financial disclosure piece is if somebody has a business. So businesses there's usually a requirement that business need to be valued, and those sometimes are complicated and take some time. And certainly if people have pensions have to be valued because they're considered an asset for a division. And those pension valuations, again, sometimes can take some time. So depending on the situation, how complicated, but once financial disclosure is completed, then it's a question of how long does it take to have those discussions and negotiations to ultimately coming up with an agreement.
Right. Which, yeah. And I remember, so there's mediation too, which you talked about as a neutral third party trying to help, the two sides come to an agreement. But what I learned, I remember through my divorce, was we tried mediation and it didn't work. And I don't think I realized that you can come out of one of those sessions, and mine was quite expensive, with getting nowhere. Mm-hmm. So that was unfortunate. And then arbitration is where someone decides, correct?
It's having a senior lawyer and sort of, rather than going to court, but you have a senior lawyer and you're agreeing that whoever that person is that the two of you choose, they're going to listen to both sides. They're going to make the decision for you. So like a judge, except not being in court.
Right.
But you agreed in advance that whatever they decide for you, you'll agree to.
And is that common, or is it more common that people go to court in your experience?
Hard to say.
Okay.
Combination, probably.
Okay.
Right.
Combination.
But we certainly do see, mediation arbitration, where they say they'll go to a mediator, but with the agreement that whatever discussions they have, that the mediator will listen to all of that, and rather than being just a neutral, they're also going to say, all right, I'm going to listen to all of this evidence. And I'm going to make a decision on your behalf. So sometimes people are looking for somebody else to make the decision for them. Sometimes when they really just can't, not so much even that they can't agree, but they want somebody to make a decision for them.
Okay. There's so much to know. It's quite incredible. Now, what would you say, is there some common financial blind spots that you see often that people aren't aware of?
I think they're surprised with regards to the assets that may need to be shared. Certainly, people are always surprised when they hear that they have to share their pension. People have an emotional connection to their pensions. I think sometimes even more so than the matrimonial home, right? It's my pension. I worked hard for it. It's my contributions. What do you mean I have to share that with you? So that becomes a surprise if you're referring to blind spot surprises. I think they're surprised that there's so much room for negotiation. They're hoping that here's a list, here's what the law says, and we'll just follow that. I think the blind spot, using your words, is the possible entitlement for somebody in terms of getting support. People understand, all right, we have to support our children. I'm okay with paying support for children, paying for their expenses and so on. But it's sometimes a shock when they find out that they also might have to be paying spousal support. And they're not prepared for that.
Okay. That's and I guess it's interesting too, because if you've never run through the numbers, there's legal calculations involved too, right? Based on the income discrepancies. Have you found too, I know oftentimes, because I used to be in the financial planning world as well, inheritances. So people not realizing that if they put an inheritance that they receive into the matrimonial home, it's now commingled.
Sure, or just spent it in a lot of cases. People get an inheritance today, right? Let's pay down the mortgage. Let's renovate the kitchen. So the money is gone. So as much as they, in their minds, have heard that, yes, inheritances can be deducted or not included, and they think they realize, yes, they've kept it in a separate account. But once it's spent, doesn't matter whether it's gone to matrimonial home or they've just spent it. And in today's world, that happens a lot, right? It's money that's come into a family and let's use it. As I say, in a lot of cases, mortgage or home renovations, that kind of thing, it's gone. So people aren't too happy when they find that out. Because again, the perception, there's a lot of myths around separation divorce, right? They've heard from a friend, this is what's happened, this is what's happened. I'm going to say in my experience, the majority of people that I see have very little real information about how divorce works. So they're just hearing bits and pieces and a lot of myths, but I thought, my friend said, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of, as much as there seems to be a lot of information online and so on, there's as much misinformation about how all of this works.
Wow. And I believe it. It really is. As you said, there's so much involved. And then even down to the financial disclosure. Our lives
are complicated today. I'm going to say people that reach out to me will say things like, but our situation's really simple. Why is it going to cost so much? Why do we need all these experts? Well, as soon as we start to ask, do you own a house? Well, yes. Do you have a mortgage? Yes. Do you have a pension? Yes. Do you have a cottage? Yes. Is there inheritance? Yes. Do you have children? Yes. Are they involved in hockey and dance and all those other activities? Yes. So that's a fairly typical family situation today. Not that simple.
No, not as simple at all.
Not that simple. So our lives are complicated today and intertwined. And if it's been a longer marriage, Certainly when we're talking about that sort of average age of in the 40s, that's typically where kids are. Certainly they're not quite launched. They might be in, finishing grade school or high school age. So there's a lot happening. There's a lot of expenses that are going on too in terms of family.
Right. Wow. Now, what would you say after separation are some of the immediate financial updates someone should make?
Well, certainly once they've separated and let's say, because they're focusing on the whole separation date, but they should be looking at, all their beneficiary designations, right? Do they still want to keep their spouse on life insurance policies? In some cases, they might have to because of support obligations, but on any other investments that they have that have beneficiary designations, to be sure, do they still want to keep them that way? And it's something that people just sort of forget about. If they're older, are they looking at perhaps applying for Canada Pension Plan benefit splitting? Because that's something that's allowed, and it's something that sometimes can be easily missed and not necessarily detailed in the separation agreement. So if two people have worked for, or if one of the spouses has worked for a long time and the other hasn't, their Canada pension incomes may be significantly different, and there's a way of equalizing those or sharing those credits, and that's something that's again can be easily forgotten about.
Wow. Okay. And then another one.
Wills, changing anything in their wills, of course.
Yes, very important. Another one too, I think, tell me if I'm right or wrong, is if your house is owned joint tenants with rights of survivorship, and before you divorce, can you sever that?
Well, depending on what your separation agreement says. So, when it comes to the house, which is usually the largest asset that most people have, the decisions usually are there. Are you going to sell it? Sold? Then there's cash. Or if one of you is going to be buying out the other spouse. And so then the details and the documentation that may be required to transfer certainly the ownership of the house, but then also transferring mortgage details if there's a mortgage in place.
Right.
But all of that usually happens as part of the details of a separation agreement.
Okay. Which again is there's so much involved. Now, many women, I mean, any women who I've talked to have gone through it. It seems to be, and you tell me if it's the case, that a lot of them haven't handled the finances before. Now, maybe things are changing, but how do you help individuals kind of step into financial confidence, or what role as a divorce consultant can you play in helping someone who, I think it's overwhelming if they've never looked at finances before, to all of a sudden now have to be doing it on their own, and then again go through all these disclosures and find all of these documents?
Well, that's certainly a big part of the role that I play, and certainly for the kinds of clients, whether you say female, but males fall into that category as well these days, right? Depending on the relationship they've had in their marriage. Right. Sometimes one person is more involved in family finances than the other spouse. So sometimes it's the opposite. Men find themselves in that kind of situation where, they put their paycheck in a bank account and then wife has taken care of everything. So they're as clueless as the wife would be. But the starting point there is, number one, to distinguish between family finances and family investments. So sometimes, and I'm going to say, females feel very intimidated saying, I haven't handled the financial issues in the marriage. And there's a difference in, have they not been involved in the investment side, whether it's anything from completing the tax returns to making decisions on investments, versus family finances. Are they the ones that have paid the bills? Or are they the ones that have done the spending? So it may be they haven't paid the bills, but they're the ones that know how much the kids' boots cost, and they've signed up for all the swimming lessons and hockey lessons and all of that. So I empower them by first trying to clarify for them how much they actually do know. And it's surprising how much they do know when it comes to this, I'm going to say, the spending side of things. So in separation and divorce, certainly that's really, really more important than understanding the investment side. Because on the investment side, it comes down to really working with a good financial advisor that can help and coach and maybe get them a little bit more involved. But the minutiae detail of investments is less critical, at least at this stage of their lives.
Absolutely.
The other piece that I really work on with clients, besides, how do you get the financial disclosure, is your banking online?
Right.
Do you have the right passwords to get on these things? Do you have a CRA My account that can get you all the information in terms of tax information, Canada Pension Plan benefits, that kind of thing. So that's just giving them direction of how do you access all of these financial facts. But the other part of the work that I spend a lot of time with clients is really looking at their spending, their historic spending. We refer to them as budgets, although I don't like using that word, because a budget is something, somebody's told me I can't spend all this money. It's getting a real sense of what their lifestyle cost them when they were together.
Right. And
then starting to work on what their lifestyle is going to cost them once they're on their own. Because if they have an understanding of that, then they're better able to analyze and understand the financial implications of their support settlement. So if they end up with, this is how we're dividing property. So I'm going to end up with the house, and therefore I'm going to end up with the mortgage, and I'm going to keep my RSPs, and I'm going to keep my TFSA account, and my spouse is going to keep their pension and something else. And then the difference in that is I might get some kind of equalization payment, right? The pension's worth, and spouse's assets are worth a lot more than mine, so I might get an equalization payment. And then looking at what support, whether child or spousal support, I may be getting, until you understand what you'll need in terms of going forward once you're on your own. So how much now in terms of the money I'm receiving with regards to support, my own employment, my own assets, and what will that look like? And now can I create a financial plan, spending plan, financial plan based on all of that? And that's a big part of the work that I do as a chartered divorce financial specialist, in running those kinds of forecasts, that kind of planning to say, if this is your settlement, if this is your deal, what will this look like for you? And what kind of adjustments might you have to make, right, to do that? So really those forecasts provide the answers to the kinds of questions most people have when they're thinking of separating. Can I afford to keep the house? Do I have to go back to work? Right? Can we keep the kids in all these same activities? Will I be able to retire when I plan to retire?
So right? That's amazing, really. Longer? Yeah. Your role is quite it's quite incredible how you're able to help, because I think there's the lawyer, but then there's that extra kind of step that is needed, right? For someone who's, if you've never handled the finances or never had to do this on your own, it really is, it's intimidating, it's daunting, and most people don't know the numbers. So it's great with all of your background that you're able to help someone go through that.
And those are the bottom line questions. I mean, the bottom line question in all of this, people say, will I be okay?
Yeah.
And so it's their definition of what okay means. So if somebody says, will I be okay? Does that mean to them, okay means I can stay in the house and keep the kids in the same school catchment area because I've got a great support system. The school is great. I don't want to disrupt the kids. That's very different from saying, well, you really can't afford to keep the house. The law says, based on what the law and the division is, you just can't afford to keep the house. So it's a very nuanced difference. So it's a question of, this is what the law says, and the law's kind of fuzzy in some of these areas, and what you can negotiate, and what do you need ultimately to be okay. So that's always my starting point question. So if the law says you could get more, but you'd be okay with less, and the only way you can get more is by going to court, and there's a risk there, or arguing more about this, where you can get to a quicker settlement and you can make this work, Would you be agreeable to that? So my role is to fill in the gaps there to say, if this is what you're agreeing to, or this is what you're proposing, or this is what you're thinking, how will it work for you? And can it work for you? And recognizing that one of the variables, of course, is expected lifestyle. And, the law and the way the numbers work doesn't automatically assume that you're supposed to have the same lifestyle you had before, after separation. Because now we're taking one household, even though there's, let's say, two incomes there, and separating them and trying to manage two households. Something's got to give. And that's just the reality, right? And it's obviously a hard reality for people to accept. Certainly the person that didn't want the divorce in the first place. So dealing with that. And so my role in all of that is to provide as much clarity as I can in terms of the options and looking at as many options. Can we come up with something really creative to make this work? So in some cases, for instance, and I'm in Toronto, housing is expensive. It sometimes makes no sense to sell the house and now have two people buy something else. You can't do it because they want to stay, for instance, in the same neighborhood for the sake of their children. So can we come up with something creative, something customized to allow that to happen? Maybe they both keep the house for a period of time. They make some kind of agreement of how mortgages and other expenses might be shared or not in one way, shape, or form. And perhaps then sell it in a couple of years when the kids have finished grade school, as an example, and it's easier for them to move to another neighborhood or that kind of thing. So there's a lot of options that people can be looking at. And my role is to fill in the blanks and say, if this is an option, what are the financial implications for both, right? And then we're looking at that. So rather than starting from the space of, well, we're looking for fairness, hard to be fair for you, not fair for me, it's all on the eye of the beholder in terms of what's fair, and looking for balance in some kind of way, shape, or form. Can we find balance? Certainly as a family, if there's children, right? It's how balanced is it if mom gets to stay in a beautiful big house and dad has to be in a 1-bedroom basement apartment? Yeah. How are we going to get to fairness if we're looking at it from that perspective? And the law may say, but the numbers say that's what's fair. And people are looking for, we hear so much in terms of the press of, all the ugly divorces, but there's just as many divorces, separations where couples really do want to work on something that's going to work for everybody. So they're being much more realistic in terms of their expectations, I think, certainly from a financial perspective.
That's great. And I think too, if you're able to, and I know it's not always easy, if you're able to get along more, it's the whole process is going to be easier and less expensive, right? The more we can't get along, the harder everything is. And as you said,
people aren't getting along. That's why they're separating. So they have to sort of push their emotions to the side and saying this really is, to a degree, a business transaction. How are we going to separate the business part of our marriage? And I'm not saying that's easy. I'm going to say it's really difficult. But with the kinds of professionals that we have working with good lawyers, with people like myself, there's certainly a lot of family professionals that are involved, mediators that are trained in helping couples have that kind of discussion, keeping sort of things, the emotions at bay for a period of time, to be able to say, okay, let's focus on the practical side of things. But I still know, I'm dealing with the numbers, so I'm the practical person, but I know emotion ties into it. Yes, we figure out you can't keep the house, and it doesn't matter because it's still, somebody may say, doesn't matter, I don't want the other person to have that. Or I want to keep the house at all costs, no matter what, because I want to hurt somebody, right? I want to get back at them, right? They did this to me, therefore, and there's one way of negotiating is, we had a discussion with this earlier this morning with our team. not doing anything, not negotiating. If I don't respond to anything, maybe this thing will go away. If I don't provide financial disclosure, you talked about how long this takes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, the providing financial disclosure is usually the biggest delay, certainly at the beginning, right? So one person will say, yeah, I'm really good. I'm organized. Okay, here's all the documents. Here's all the paperwork. And now we wait for information from the other side. And it's a form of negotiation. If I do nothing, maybe this will go away. I can still live in my house. Nothing's going to happen. The bills are all being paid for. And if I do nothing, why? There's no impetus in doing something. Certainly for let's say one spouse in some cases.
Wow.
So that's the delays. That's what the emotion is tying into to the discussions.
Absolutely. And so you have the modern divorce too, and the modern marriage contracts. Can you speak to your roles in that regard?
Yeah, the modern marriage, the modern divorce, we've put together a team. We're all independent. We have our own practices. Yeah. So we have two lovely lawyers, and we have a what we call our mediator communications coach. So he deals with the parenting issues, and he deals with the emotional discussions with regards to communication and so on. So we work as a team. I do the financial disclosure piece, the projections, everything I've described with you. Yeah. And the two lawyers work together, or we all work together as a team to help a couple get through all of this as efficiently as we can, as quickly as we can. I think the uniqueness of the modern divorce team is we, two things. We charge a flat fee for the work that we do.
Love that.
So people know how much it's going to cost them. Yeah. And we commit to, as much as we can, to getting people through this from a cost efficiency perspective, but also from a time efficiency perspective. We want to be working with, and we hope we work with clients who can make decisions right quickly, not quickly, as quickly as they need to, but they're not delaying. They're not using delay tactics to get through things. And so we can usually get a couple through the modern divorce, certainly within a year, if not less. I mean, that's our goal.
That's amazing. And then what about modern marriage contracts, which I know the stats say, right? If you get divorced once, your odds are more likely that you're going to get divorced a second and third time. So what is that, and how can people protect themselves?
So modern marriage contracts, really, we're again working with in the same sort of collaborative type of team setting. So we're working on people that are working on either prenups or marriage contracts. So before they get married, that they're putting together as much as they can. What if something happens? And so we're really gearing that. We've actually started gearing it to people that were getting monies from parents, lending them money to use as a down payment on their first home when they were getting married, and trying to protect those assets if something were to happen from in the process of getting separated, divorced. So protecting, money that was coming from the bank of mom and dad. And there was a lot of research that was done through the bank saying that those kinds of gifts today are big, right? I think the average gift from parents was between $100,000 and $200,000. So that's a lot of money. And if it's sunk into the matrimonial home, it's gone. It has to be shared. And so that was our initial thought in terms of setting up modern marriage contracts. But now we do that for anybody that really wants, again, a time and cost efficient way. Again, we charge a flat fee for creating marriage contracts. And again, in that setting of providing full disclosure so everybody knows what's on the table. It forces couples actually to have a discussion about their finances before they get married.
Which is, I think, good.
And yeah, again, they don't want surprises afterwards and say, oh, I didn't know you had all of this debt, and reasons that may cause challenges in their marriage.
Well, that's great that you're doing that.
Again, so whether it's the modern divorce or modern marriage contracts, that's why we keep that going. It really is a collaborative approach, a team approach to creating these kinds of agreements, and all for a flat fee.
I think that's great. I think that really
and
is
my role in
filling
all of
the
that,
need.
whether it's in those two programs or frankly any of the work
Yeah.
that I do, is the same. So whether I'm working for an individual or certainly working with a couple.
That's amazing, Eva, everything that you've done. This has been very insightful. Is there one last piece of advice you'd love to leave to someone who's, getting married and wants to set themselves up for success or considering leaving or separating? Is there one piece of advice you'd like to leave them?
I think first call shouldn't be to a lawyer, and I'm not bashing lawyers. You need that, but I think to get clarity on what's the most important goal for you. In some cases, it might be dealing with children, how you're going to be dealing with children. I think the most important piece for me over all the years that I've done that is whoever is making the decision to separate and divorce, that first conversation of how they're going to approach things after they announce that they want to separate or they can't be together anymore, is having a clear discussion of what process is going to work best for them and for the family, as opposed to, gee, and I've already called a lawyer. Because depending on the process and that first step and that first discussion can lay the groundwork of which direction this is going to take. Because once you go down a certain path, so that litigation path or that anger path or that, I'm not going to disclose or I'm going to negotiate this way, it's very hard to veer off that path. So to take a step and to think after, having that first discussion of now, how are we going to do this? Right. And let's have a calm discussion of not that we are or aren't doing it, but how are we going to do that? We have choices of how we might go about doing this. Let's have a conversation about that.
I think that's excellent advice. I really do. Because I think a lot of times emotions get heated and we don't think about these things, as you said, until we're already down the road.
And it's a road that it's very hard to turn off that road to another one.
I know.
It can happen, but it's hard. And then your mind gets into that mode. Mm-hmm. Well, this is the way I guess it has to be. And we've already decided this, so we can't turn back.
Right.
It's too expensive to turn back. We've already spent so much money with lawyers. We don't feel this is quite working well, but we've already sunk so much into this. We can't turn this around.
Yeah. Well, Eva, I think what you're doing is amazing, and being able to be that third party to help individuals going through divorce, it really is a hard thing to go through in life, right? So to have that support there and your knowledge is just incredible. So, and thank you for coming on the show today to share that knowledge with us and to empower our audience. I really appreciate it. And for our listeners, please reach out to Eva if you need any guidance or those considering navigating separation or divorce. And as always, I like to just say that this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. So you always have to consult your own professionals. Thank you so much, Eva.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll talk soon.